Così una volta udì. Il Bhagavan dimorava a Rajgir, sulla montagna Picco degli Avvoltoi, assieme a un vasto sangha di monaci e a un vasto sangha di bodhisattva. In quell'occasione il Bhagavan era assorbito nel samadhi sulle categorie dei fenomeni.
This is the recitation of the Heart Sutra.
Contemporaneamente il Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara stava applicandosi proprio nella pratica della profonda perfezione della saggezza e vide anche i 5 aggregati come vuoti di un'intrinseca natura. Poi, tramite il potere del Buddha, il venerabile Shariputra così disse al Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: come deve addestrarsi ogni figlio del lignaggio che desideri impegnarsi nella pratica della profonda perfezione della saggezza? Così egli parlò e il Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara rispose allora al venerabile figlio di Saradvati: Shariputra, ogni figlio o figlia del lignaggio che desideri impegnarsi nella pratica della profonda perfezione della saggezza dovrebbe applicarsi in essa nel seguente modo, apprendendo correttamente e ripetutamente anche i 5 aggregati come vuoti di un'intrinseca natura. La forma è vuota, la vacuità è forma, la vacuità non è altro che forma e la forma non è altro che vacuità. Allo stesso modo sono vuoti sensazioni, discriminazioni, fattori di composizione e coscienze. Similmente, Shariputra, tutti i fenomeni sono vacuità, sono privi di caratteristiche, non sono prodotti e non cessano, non sono contaminati e non sono privi di contaminazione, non diminuiscono e non crescono. Perciò, Shariputra, nella vacuità non c'è forma, né sensazione, né discriminazione, né fattore di composizione, né coscienza. Non c'è occhio, né orecchio, né naso, né lingua, né corpo, né mente. Non ci sono forme visive, né suoni, né odori, né sapori, né oggetti tangibili, né fenomeni. E neppure il costituente dell'occhio e così via, fino ad includere il costituente della mente e il costituente della coscienza mentale. Non c'è ignoranza né estinzione dell'ignoranza, fino a includere anche vecchiaia e morte ed estinzione della vecchiaia e della morte. Similmente non c'è sofferenza, origine, cessazione e sentiero. Non c'è saggezza suprema né ottenimenti e neppure mancanza di ottenimenti. Perciò, Shariputra, poiché non c'è ottenimento, i bodhisattva si basano e dimorano nella perfezione della saggezza. Le loro menti, senza più oscurazioni e senza paura, essendo completamente andati al di là di ogni errore, raggiungono il punto finale, il nirvana. E affidandosi alla perfezione della saggezza, è evidente che tutti i Buddha dimoranti nei 3 tempi si sono anche completamente risvegliati all'insorpassabile, perfetta e piena illuminazione. Perciò il mantra della perfezione della saggezza, il mantra della grande conoscenza, il mantra insorpassato, il mantra uguale a ciò che non ha eguali, il mantra che pacifica completamente tutte le sofferenze, dal momento che non è falso, dovrebbe essere conosciuto come vero. Si proclama il mantra della perfezione della saggezza, Tayata Gate Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhisoha. Shariputra, è in questo modo che il Bodhisattva Mahasattva dovrebbe addestrarsi nella profonda perfezione della saggezza. Quindi il Bhagavan riemerse da quel samadhi ed elogiò il Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara dicendo: ben detto, figlio del lignaggio, è proprio così, è proprio così. Si dovrebbe praticare la perfezione della saggezza proprio come tu hai mostrato. Ne gioiscono perfino i Tathagata. Quando il Bhagavan ebbe così parlato, il venerabile figlio di Saradvati, il Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, l'intera assemblea attorno a loro, assieme al mondo degli dei, uomini, semidei e Gandharva, esultarono e porsero alte lodi alla parola del Bhagavan.
Good morning, Your Holiness, and good morning to all the people who are with us today. Your Holiness, on behalf of the Italian Buddhist Union, all the members of its centers, and everyone present here with us online, I wish to thank you from the deep of our hearts for having accepted our invitation and for sharing with us your incomparable knowledge and experience of the core Buddhist teaching on the Four Noble Truths, the foundation of the Buddha Dharma and the heart teaching of the Buddha to which all schools of Buddhism refer. Briefly, Your Holiness, the Italian Buddhist Union was established in 1985 and governs its relations with the Italian state thanks to a law issued in 2012. Italian Buddhist Union is responsible for supporting 60 Italian Dharma centers that belong to the Pali and Sanskrit tradition, so Vajrayana, Mahayana, and Theravada traditions. They preserve the quality of the Buddha's teachings in Italy. Italian Buddhist Union activities have also included contributions in the area of social service by helping, where possible, humanitarian projects, doing so without discriminating on the basis of religious belief. Our commitment has focused particularly on education, environmental protection, and new and increasing poverty, especially during this difficult period. We have contributed to projects linked to the Buddhist place of origin, in particular in India and Nepal. We have also strengthened and developed relationships with other religions here in Italy. In this way, Italian Buddhist Union has been actively committed to supporting the Dharma, sustaining the importance of universal values, and promoting interreligious dialogue. In this work, Your Holiness, you are a constant source of inspiration, and we hope in some way to have supported you in your main personal commitments. I will not take any more time away from your precious reflections, Your Holiness, even if an entire day will not be a sufficient time to thank you in the right measure. So today we see each other at a distance, but we fervently hope to be able once again to meet you as soon as possible in person. So that's why we request you to come and turn the wheel of Dharma here in Italy as soon as the pandemic is over. Thank you so much again and again and again, Your Holiness, on behalf of all the Italian Buddhists. Thank you.
Thank you. So today, the Italian from Milano, so the Italian Buddhist Union, you have interest in Buddhism, and asked me if I could teach on the Four Noble Truths, explaining the True Truths and the Four Noble Truths. So there are many different religious traditions in the world. All of these religions has the same message of love. So though philosophically these different religious traditions are different, but love and compassion is something which all of them teach commonly. Therefore, in this world, for a few thousand centuries, for a few thousand years, so for the last over 3,000 years or so, in India, there has been the teaching of ahimsa, non-violence or not harming, and karuna, or compassion. So in India, all the different religions of the world exist. So because of better contact between the Westerners and Easterners, and then because of that, there's an increasing number of people taking interest in paying attention to the teaching of the Buddha, and within which there is the Pali tradition and as Nalanda institution of learning developed, there had been a study of Buddhism, and many Nalanda scholars took interest in Buddhism, and the Sanskrit tradition of Buddhism spread there and flourished. In the Buddhist tradition in Tibet, started with Master Chandarakshita, the great abbot Chandarakshita, who was invited by the Tibetan Emperor Trisong Detsen. And therefore, Chandarakshita established the Nalanda tradition of Buddhism in Tibet. So this was introduced to Tibetans, the Nalanda tradition, to Tibetans by the great abbot Chandarakshita, who himself was a great philosopher and a logician. So he was a middle way philosopher of the middle way school of philosophy, and also a great scholar of epistemology and logic. So he wrote the Madhyamaka Alankara, the ornament of the middle way, and also the Tattva Samgraha, the compendium of reality. And so since the 8th century, the Tibetans have been following both the Madhyamaka, the middle way philosophy, and logic and epistemology, which are considered like the two lions holding their necks together, like yoked necks of two lions. So, when we explain the teaching of the Buddha through the middle way school and logic, we use logic and reasoning, not just follow faith. So the Buddha himself has said, O monks and scholars, just as gold is tested by burning, rubbing, and cutting, likewise you should examine my teaching thoroughly and then accept it, and not because you have faith or devotion in me. And therefore, the Buddhist tradition that we follow as Tibetans is based on reason and logic. And so today, when people are taking interest in the Buddhist philosophy, even amongst the scientists, there are people who do take interest in it. So such is the situation today. And therefore, you, my friends, Italian friends, they have asked me to teach on the Four Noble Truths and the Two Truths. The Four Noble Truths are the foundation of the teaching of the Buddha. Right during the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, but before that, even before that, right after enlightenment, the Buddha said that I've discovered this nectar-like teaching, which is peaceful, profound, peaceful, free from elaborations of fabrication, and unconditioned luminosity, which, even if I were to teach to others, nobody will understand. Therefore, I shall remain silent in the forest. And so, the Buddha was quite so the Buddha said that nobody will understand this truth that he has found, and therefore he remained in the forest without giving any teachings. And then later, during the first sermon of the Buddha, the 5 first human disciples had been his companions as ascetics, and therefore when they requested him to teach, he gave the teaching on the Four Noble Truths. And in the Sanskrit tradition, we enumerate these 3 turnings of the wheel of Dharma. So the first turning of the wheel of Dharma was about the Four Noble Truths. So within this, there is the teaching on the Four Noble Truths from the point of view of their identity, and then the function, and then the result. So regarding the first Noble Truth says, pertaining to the first Noble Truth, the Buddha said, this is the Noble Truth of suffering, and so forth. And then with regard to the function, or how to go about with this understanding of the Four Noble Truths, he said, suffering must be known. So all of us, down to the smallest insects, do not want suffering. And therefore, what we must do is look for the cause of the suffering. And therefore, the Buddha said suffering must be overcome. And whether it is possible to do that or not, the root of suffering, or the origin of suffering, are twofold: those of the mental afflictions and karma, and mainly the 3 poisonous afflictions. Of course, these are taught in the Pali tradition as well. But in the second and third turnings of the wheel of Dharma, the explanation of the mental afflictions is given in great detail, and especially the teaching on selflessness. And even in the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, when the Buddha deals with the third aspect of the Four Noble Truths, he says, of course, the suffering must be known, but there's nothing to be known. Origin must be abandoned, but there's nothing to be abandoned, and so forth. And so there, the teaching on the selflessness is related. So the Buddha was, of course, he should be a skillful teacher, and he was. And so with regard to this verse, so the profound and the peaceful in that verse that he uttered right after his enlightenment relates to the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. And then, free from conceptual elaborations, refers to the true cessation. So it shows how, whether it is possible to overcome our mental afflictions or not, and whether there is such thing as the the quality attained by abandoning these mental afflictions or not. And so here we can also relate that of the dependent origination free from the 8 extremes as well. And then in the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, within which there is also the Tathagata Garbha Sutra, which is the source or the root text of the Mahayana Uttara Tantra, where there is the teaching of the Buddha nature, the basic element or come. And so, in the first utterance of the Buddha, where he says luminous and uncompounded or unconditioned, refers to this basic element of the Buddha nature. And the intrinsic or the basic nature of the mind itself is luminous or clear light, whereas the mental afflictions are distorted conceptions. And all the different mental afflictions come from the 3 poisonous afflictions: desires, attachment, hatred, and ignorance. And so, with regard to all of these, in turn, are rooted in the ignorance. And ignorance, particularly according to the Master Nagarjuna's tradition, is that ignorance which grasps at some kind of independent true existence. And as the 400 verses of Aryabhadeva says, just as the physical faculty permeates all other faculties, likewise ignorance permeates all other mental afflictions. And to overcome that, one must, when that is overcome, the rest of the mental afflictions are overcome. And that is overcome through the understanding of dependent origination. And therefore, if you are able to overcome this fundamental ignorance, you will be able to overcome all the rest of the mental afflictions. And then the term clear light or luminosity and unconditioned, in the third turning of the wheel, it seems to refer to the subjective clear light mind. Whereas in the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, the perfection of wisdom sutras seems to teach that of the object clear light, which is emptiness. And so the Buddha gave teachings on the 4 Noble Truths, repeating them 3 times, making up 12 different aspects of the teaching. So, thanks to Master Abbot Chandarakshita, the great Abbot Chandarakshita, we follow the teaching of the Buddha based on logic and epistemology. So today, as science advances and has advanced, it has focused mainly on the material development alone and not focused on mind, understanding the workings of the mind in detail. So this, we're talking about peace in the world, peace of mind. But this must come from within our mind, because what disturbs our peace of mind is within ourselves. And therefore, to work against that, we must work with our mind to counter our attachment, anger, and so forth. And therefore, the object clear light, emptiness, and the subject of clear light, mind, the clear light mind must be brought together to overcome all these afflictions and reach the ultimate, the attainment of Buddha's nirvana, or the state of having abandoned or purified all these defilements. And therefore, we have these great Indian masters' writings, such as Master Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamaka Karika, the fundamental wisdom verses of the middle way, and there is the Prasanapada commentary by Master Chandrakirti, and also which is more the explaining the words of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, and then with regard to the meaning of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, Master Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka Avatara and his auto commentary are there. So the verses in the 6th chapter, verses 34, 35, and 36, so these are very important verses which say that things have no existence when you cannot find so His Holiness quotes from 34 to 39, and so although things cannot be found when you put them under the test of ultimate scrutiny, yet they do exist by way of imputation and designation on the basis of the parts and so forth. So in verses number 38 and 39, it says that things do, we can still say, though we cannot find things when we search for their final identity, yet it doesn't mean that they don't exist at all. They do exist by way of imputation or designation based on their collections of constituent factors and so forth. And then Master Chandrakirti also says that this profound emptiness or suchness cannot be understood by even those who are very learned, but it could be understood by people who have habituated themselves with this profound view in the past lives and so forth. And then, of course, Master so with regard to the cosmology, of course, we have Master Master Vasubandhu's text, Abhidhammakosha Karika, but his mention of the so you should understand that in order to understand the Four Noble Truths precisely and thoroughly, you need to understand the two truths. So, when we talk about overcoming the mental afflictions, we should understand that that is possible because things are empty of independent existence. And so, these things being empty of an independent existence is contrary to how are grasping at true existence, holds on to things having some independent existence. So this appearance of things having some independent existence is distorted view, because things don't exist that way. So wisdom realizing emptiness or selflessness is directly opposite to that of the grasping, ignorance grasping a true existence. And since this grasping a true existence can be eliminated by this wisdom realizing selflessness, you need to understand that on the basis of understanding emptiness, by which you will be able to understand how it is possible to attain true cessation within yourself, you will be able to understand the Four Noble Truths. And so you don't have to resort to scriptural citation as such, but you will be able to confirm the truth from your own logical and experience. And therefore, you Italian friends should take interest in studying these the True Truths and the Four Noble Truths. So you may say that you are doing some meditation, but perhaps you are doing meditation which is called thoughtlessness, which was there in Tibet in the past, but after the coming of Master Kamala Shila, those meditators were expelled from Tibet. So, in verse Madhyamaka Avatara, verse chapter 6, verse 225, it says, though his mind may rest continuously in cessation, he also generates compassion for beings bereft of protection. Advancing further, he will also outshine through his wisdom all those. No. Sorry, verse number 224, sorry. That thus illuminated by the rays of the wisdom light, the Bodhisattva sees as clearly as the gooseberry or on his open palm that the three realms in their entirety are unborn from their very start. And through the force of conventional truth, he journeys to cessation. And then, at the end of the 6th chapter of Madhyamaka Avatara, Master Chandrakirti says that through the combination of the two truths, the conventional and the ultimate, for which he uses the analogy of the two wings of a swan, where he says, and like a king of swans soaring ahead of the other accomplished swans with white wings of conventional and ultimate truth spread wide, propelled by the powerful winds of virtue, the Bodhisattva would cruise to the excellent far shore, these oceanic qualities of the conquerors. So, from these, the more you analyze the teaching of the Buddha, according to the Nalanda tradition, you will be able to confirm from your own experience that the teaching of the Buddha can be demonstrated through logic and reason, not just resorting to scriptural authority or citation. So, of course, I do not demean other religions at all. I, in fact, respect all other religious traditions because all of them teach how to be, have a warm heart, and therefore they are worthy of our respect. But when it comes to philosophical understanding, the Indian traditions, and particularly the Nalanda tradition of Buddhism, is incredible in terms of how the truth of the teaching of the Buddha are demonstrated and established through reason and logic, and therefore we must not leave these teachings just in words, but do analyze. First, develop the understanding through hearing the teaching or studying it, and then reflecting on them, and you will be able to develop some experience within yourself. So the Four Noble Truths, with regard to the third repetition, the Buddha leads us to the understanding of the ultimate truth. So the possibility of attaining true cessation within ourselves can be understood if you use reason, because the mind's basic nature is luminous, and that the afflictions are temporary or adventitious, and therefore they can be overcome. So I usually jokingly tell my Pali friends of Pali tradition, when they come across, I tell them that when they come across a difficult point in the teaching, and they do not have the tool of logic to understand that, and therefore they are like without the teeth to chew on these hard problems, whereas the Sanskrit tradition is like having and therefore they just have to chew on or munch on the hard problems, whereas in the Sanskrit tradition we can chew on these difficult problems. So the Italian Buddhist Union and the members' centers, please keep this in mind. In Tibet, we do talk about the yoked, the crossed necks of two lions, which are the Madhyamaka tradition philosophy and logic and epistemology. Of course, we do talk about that, but we begin with logic primer for children, and then we go on to the study of mind, the different taxonomy of mind, awareness, and we also study the teaching of the Buddha through debate, which is an amazing teaching tradition that was established. The Nalanda tradition established by Master Chandrakshita, and then the debates tradition that spread in Tibet was started by Tibetan masters like Chaba Chögyal Sengye and so forth. And therefore, debate is a great tool to investigate and analyze the teaching thoroughly. And so in our schools, even secular schools, we teach I've given teaching on the Lorik mind and awareness. There's a book written by Acharya Yongzin which is a versified text, and these are also studied by school children. So let's start with the question and answer session.
Good morning, Your Holiness. Thank you very much for these precious teachings. My name is Stefano Bettera. We have several questions. The first comes from Ron Acorn, President of the European Buddhist Union.
Thank you so much, Your Holiness, for giving the European Buddhist Union the precious opportunity to ask a question. It is a true blessing.
Welcome, Ron.
Thank you so much to the Italian Buddhist Union for hosting this event, and thank you so much, Your Holiness, for giving the European Buddhist Union the precious opportunity to ask a question. It is a true blessing. So Buddhism has a long history in Asia, but it is quite new in Europe. And so in relaying the Buddha Dharma to Europeans, which elements must be kept and which can be adapted?
So in Tibet, for example, before Buddhism was spread there, we have our own indigenous religion. And in those times, there was a very close tie between Xiangshung and Tibet. So we call them Xiangbu. And so we have the Burn tradition before Buddhism came to Tibet. And then, since the time of Master Abbot Shandarakshita, but in any case, even before that, in the 7th century, during the time of the Tibetan king Songtsen Gampo, who married a Chinese princess at that time, Tibetans came across Buddhism, initially perhaps since that time, and then when the Chinese princess married the Tibetan king Songtsen Gampo, she also brought a Tibetan Buddha statue to Tibet, the Cho statue in Chokang. And later, then in the 8th century, when Master Abbot Shandarakshita taught Buddhism to Tibetans, he said, you have your own writing system. Therefore, without having to rely on Sanskrit or Pali languages, he advised Tibetans to translate the teaching into Tibetan. So this script, the writing system, was invented in the 7th century during the Songtsen Gampo's time. So since we have this Tibetan script with its alphabet, consonants and vowels, Master Shandarakshita advised Tibetans to translate the teachings in Pali and Sanskrit into Tibetan. And some of my friends even have told me that Master Abbot Shandarakshita himself put effort in studying Tibetan. So today, the Kangyur, over 100 volumes, and the Tengyur, over 200 volumes. In the Tibetan style of book, we have these texts. So because we already had the Tibetan writing system, we were able to translate the text teachings in Pali and Sanskrit traditions into our own language. So Burn tradition even exists today, although Buddhism flourished in Tibet since the 8th century. So we have certain practices which have come from the Burn tradition, perhaps, like we have this practice of doing a ritual for wealth, Yangdrup. And in Potala Palace, I have seen some kind of a big vase somewhere, and we do the ritual time regularly. So similarly in the West, because Buddhism is new, many people might find it quite uncomfortable to come across this teaching, but then you cannot, of course, force people to follow the teaching of the Buddha, because you, the Westerners, have your own traditional religion, the Judeo-Christian religion. Of course, you should, the people who have interest in Buddhism could study the teaching, and you should also try to preserve your own traditional religion, while there may be a few who have special mental disposition to Buddhism. So all religions teach about morality and compassion and so forth, and therefore we should respect all religious traditions. As for me, one of my commitments is religious harmony in the world. So philosophically, Christianity and Islam and Buddhism are different, but whether you follow which religion or not is up to the individuals according to their own mental dispositions. But if you look at Christians, we can see how they serve people who are deprived of basic needs and so forth, so very poor, who are stricken with poverty. So they are able to engage in such activities based on their own faith in the religion, in their own religion, Christianity. Next question, please.
Thank you, Your Holiness. The second question comes from the Abbess Reverend Marosa Miyoko Agnoli from the Soto Zen Monastery of Fudenji, close to Parma in Italy.
Your Holiness, my question is, monastic and secular discipline, what is the most appropriate commitment that was in today's life?
So Buddha himself went from home to homelessness, and also the 5 first human disciples became renunciants. And therefore, we have Vinaya, Abhidhamma, and Sutra, or discourses in the teaching of the Buddha. So today, if you look at in Sri Lanka and Burma and Thailand, we find great Vinaya masters. And so they are upholding the teaching of the Buddha, the basic, the foundational teaching of the Buddha. And so the monastic system is the foundation of the teaching of the Buddha. And then amongst the lay people also, we have the Upasaka and Upasaki vows. or precepts you can practice. There also comes within the Vinaya practice, the ethical discipline. So even if you don't take any of these vows, whether monastic or lay person's vows, if you can learn the teaching of the Buddha, the different instructions, and also philosophy and logic, and particularly the learning about mind and emotions for peace of mind, these can be taken as academic or intellectual studies and not necessarily touching any religion. So this is possible according to the Indian tradition of secularism. So if you're a Buddhist and you think of practicing Buddhism, then if you can take any of the vows, whether layperson's vows or monastic vows, you can go about with the practice of Buddhism accordingly, but without having any religious belief, to live a good life, to be compassionate and loving to others in society. So amongst the human beings, we have people with mental dispositions, different mental dispositions. And those who are inclined to keep monastic vows, they may do so and practice the teaching of the Buddha. And even if you don't want to take any vows, you can still be a good person, a warm-hearted person in society. This is possible. So in the schools, teaching about morality and ethics should not be confined to being a Buddhist or a monastic practitioner, but as scientists say, we as human beings are social beings, social animals, and therefore we rely or depend on the community that we live in, and therefore the warm-heartedness, love and compassion are something that are needed in our society and which are lacking in our society today. And so we need to educate about these in our society.
The next question comes from Reverend Shoryu Tarabini of the Nichiren Shu Association in Cereseto.
Good morning, Your Holiness. Thank you so much for your teaching and for this opportunity to ask you a question today. My question is, how do you see the development and direction of Buddhism in world society over the next 50 years?
This is very difficult to say. However, regarding the global warming, which is increasing, some scientists whom I know have said that in the next 5 decades, these the global warming will increase so much so that all the waters in the world will dry up. So according to Buddhism, we talk about past Buddhas like Kashyapa Buddha, who have given their teachings while they lived, and then their teachings became extinct eventually. And then the next Buddha came, and Shakyamuni Buddha then appeared, and he has given the teaching. So today we are in an era where it is said that even human beings would have difficulty living after a certain period of time. And in our teachings, we find mention of destruction of the world through the wind and water and fire. So it seems we are in the era where the world may be destroyed by fire. So we would be saying goodbye to this world at that time and go to other planets, other galaxies.
Next.
Thank you, Your Holiness. The next one comes from Gemma Randelli, President of the Gapelin Center in Milano.
My question is, why with grasping to true existence arise attachment and anger for the object, and with understanding of dependent arising, delusions don't arise?
As I quoted the 400 verses, where it's very clearly mentioned that just as the physical faculty permeates all other faculties, likewise ignorance permeates all other mental afflictions. And therefore, they will be destroyed when the ignorance is destroyed. So what happens to us is we grow attachment or anger or hatred towards objects or others when they appear to have some kind of objective independent existence from their own side. So these objects to which we are attached or we feel angry at, they appear to be existing from their own side. And when you are able to say that there is no, these objects do not exist the way they appear, then that very basis of our attachment or anger will not be there. And in quantum physics, even quantum physics say that things do not appear the way they appear in quantum physics, they say that things don't exist the way they appear to us, because they appear to be solid, something hard, but they are made up of different particles, subatomic particles and so forth. So we can break them down into these particles. So here, from the Prasangika Madhyamaka point of view, when you are able to confirm that nothing whatever has any objective independent existence from their own side, therefore there is no basis for the attachment or anger and so forth. So the ultimate reason to prove that things do not exist from their own side is because they are dependently arising or dependently arisen. So they do not have any self-instituting existence in and of themselves. But ignorance, whether things are good or bad, to the ignorance, these things appear to have some objective existence. But when you are able to reflect that things do not have that way of existence, then you will be able to reduce this clinging to objective independent existence, and that will dissolve. Next, please.
The next one comes from Massimo Corona, President of the Istituto La Mazzoncapa in Pomaia, Pisa.
No voice.
Massimo, puoi aprire il microfono, per favore?
He's not listening. So, in quantum physics, they say that things do not exist the way they appear to us. So that is compatible with the Madhyamaka view. But in quantum physics, it seems they seem to be rejecting. They seem to have an understanding that rejects any externality of things. So with regard to the object and the subjective mind, the Chitta Matras say that the object and subjective mind, which perceives it, are of the same nature, and therefore they say that there is no duality of object and subject as such. So quantum physics also seems to be saying something like that. The Chittamatra view may be helpful in reducing our mental afflictions. But in order to overcome all the mental afflictions, we need the Madhyamaka philosophy, and particularly the Prasangika Madhyamaka philosophical understanding that things have no independent existence, whatever, but they are merely designated. So quantum physics can talk about how things have no objective existence, whether in relation to the matter, external, but they do not yet have any understanding of the mind as such. And so it helps understanding of the Madhyamaka philosophy or Buddhist philosophy as well.
Next.
The next question comes from Lama Concho Luigi of the Karma Tech Tsun Choling Center of the Karma-Kagyu tradition of Brescia.
Your Holiness, our question is, at the time when it is inevitable for many people to encounter suffering, how can we relate to suffering not as an obstacle, but rather as a resource? Thank you.
Oh yeah. That Zoda de Simjik any the ending the Denia Karada Tungelam to Chiru or the Tungelam to Chinu Sadi.
So here we can relate the teaching of Bodhichitta.
That's also Lugitunga. That is
so when you have physical suffering, for example, when in terms of transforming the negative experiences into a path. When you are suffering, you may do some prayer that through this suffering that I have, may all the negativities that I have accumulated or created in the past, negative karmas, be purified. So when you are faced with adverse conditions, as it is said in the teaching of Lojong, transformation of mind, may I be able to transform this into adverse condition into the path to enlightenment. So when you are suffering, you may also think of taking on suffering of others onto yourself, and that will help. We do say the Lama Chepa, where it says, therefore, My kind master, please bless me to be able to take on the suffering of others and give my joy and happiness to them. Next, please.
The next one comes from Lama Palji Rinpoche of the Mandala Center in Milano. Thank you.
Your Holiness, this is my question. I think that being humble is an important element for the development of bodhicitta and the practice of compassion. From your point of view, where would you place humility within the Eightfold Path?
So, practicing humility has to do with the practice of bodhicitta. As Bodhisattva Charyavatara says, you should always hold yourself lowly. And then in the 8 verses of Mind Training, it says, whenever I interact with someone, may I view myself as the lowest among all. So when you relate this humility to the Eightfold Noble Path, so as I quoted the lines from the 8 verses of Mind Training, where it says, whenever I interact with anyone, may I view myself as the lowest of all, and from the very depths of my heart respectfully hold others as superior. And so here, the Bodhisattva path is related. And Master Shantideva says, all suffering in the world comes from wishing oneself to be happy, and all happiness comes from wishing others to be happy. What need is there more to say? Look at the difference between the Buddhas, who have become fully enlightened, and ourselves, who are still left in samsara. And then, without exchanging one's own joy and happiness with the suffering of others, live alone, achieving Buddhahood, even in samsara you will not have happiness. Therefore, which intelligent person or sensible person would feel discouraged to ride the horse of bodhicitta, which leads one from bliss to bliss, out of despair? And so you should reflect on the advantages of holding others to be dear and cherish them, and the disadvantage of cherishing oneself alone. And so here, when you look upon yourself as the lowest, it doesn't mean you should feel depressed. But you are actually having this determination that you are going to work for all sentient beings across the expanse of space, to lead them to the state of enlightenment. So here, humility does not mean I cannot do anything, but you have this incredible courage to work for the benefit of others.
Thank you.
Next.
There are 3 more questions that I'm going to ask you. And the first one is, which is the difference between the nirvana of a Arahant and the Dhammakaya of a Buddha?
Oh, 산지의 죽은 일이야. 영원토는 쳐버 다 시야트가 가고래.
It's difficult for me to tell the difference from experience. But the nirvana of the arahats have overcome all the mental delusions, but they have still not overcome the obscuration to knowledge, whereas the Buddha has overcome all these defilements completely, the grasping at true existence and its residual stains, all are overcome by a Buddha. So if you study the text, the Buddha has reached the highest and the final attainment, whereas the arahats of the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas have not reached that goal yet.
Thank you, Your Holiness. The next one is, what is a substantial cause of good compassion in the mind of enlightenment?
So, first of all, you should have the sense of holding others, cherishing others. When that increases more, further and further, then you will be able to have that courage to give yourself up for the benefit of others. So you should have a great courage in order to have great compassion. So when you have compassion, you are thinking of the suffering of others, and when you have compassion, you will actually think or feel determined to work for others to overcome that. And then, in order to be able to do that, you also need to understand that the defilements in our mind are something that can be overcome, and the different spiritual experiences are something that you can attain. And so you should not just focus on one point alone. You should bring the other factors together with one practice. And so when you bring all these different factors together, then your compassion will increase further and further.
Thank you, Your Holiness. This is the last question of today. And the question is, which verses would you suggest in order to better understand the emptiness of phenomena?
So first of all, I would say Mula Madhyama Kakarika of Master Nagarjuna, where he says there's liberation is when all the karma and delusions are exhausted, and karma and delusion arise from conceptual constructs, and they in turn are rooted in this fabrication, and the fabrication is overcome by emptiness. And then if you think along the lines of Master Chandrakirti's so the four absurd consequences that are given in Madhyamaka of Avatara, the verses 34 to 36, and would be very helpful to think. And when you analyze things through the fivefold reasoning or the sevenfold reasoning in terms of analyzing the chariot and so forth, you will see that you cannot find anything you cannot say things are this or that. And when you say if you say that things cannot exist when you, because you cannot find them through this kind of ultimate analysis, then you would be, it would be tantamount to say that the Arya's meditative equipoise destroys all entities. And when you actually assert that things must exist from their own side, then that again gives more problem. And because then you would also have to say that things would exist, the entities would be able to withstand this ultimate analysis as well. And so these verses of Madhyamaka Avatara and the Mula Madhyamaka Karika are something that I always recite. So these really are helpful. So when you reflect on these verses, it really is helpful. So things, though they cannot be found under this kind of analysis, yet they do exist by way of mere convention and designation.
Your Holiness, please accept our heartfelt thanks for having shared with us your very precious teaching and advice. We make our request and dedication to you for a very long life, so that you may continue to benefit all sentient beings. And we hope that Your Holiness will be soon able to visit Italy, where many people wish to see you and listen to your precious teaching. Thank you very much, His Holiness.
So I thought of doing a Bodhichitta ceremony. So as I explained, Bodhichitta, in the 6th session Guru Yoga practice, we do this practice 3 times a day and 3 times in the evening. So I do take the generate bodhicitta, so I do cultivate bodhicitta every day. And when I do long life prayers, I visualize Aryatara. In my visualization, Aryatara, and then recite this verse for bodhicitta and bodhisattva vows. So all of us are followers of the Buddha. So the Buddha helps all sentient beings, and he's able to do that because he went through the cultivation of bodhicitta in the beginning and then cultivated all the paths and the merit and wisdom, and then finally became fully enlightened. So it is very important for us to Imagine the Buddha in front of you, surrounded by bodhisattva deities like Manjushri, Maitreya, and so forth. So let us go through this practice of cultivating bodhicitta. So I do this practice on a daily basis. So we have been able to come across the teaching of the Buddha, and therefore on a daily basis you should make the determination that you will work for the benefit of all sentient beings. So the lines that we are going to follow are: to the Buddha, Dharma, and the highest assembly I seek refuge until I am enlightened, to fulfill the interest of myself. No. I seek refuge in the three jewels. I confess all misdeeds individually. I rejoice in the virtues of all beings. I take to heart Buddha's enlightenment, and so forth. And so you should practice bodhicitta for your own good as well as the good of others, and for the short-term and long-term good of oneself and others, and to be able to transform adversary into the path to enlightenment also can be possible when you, through bodhicitta, and to purify your negativities. There is no greater force than bodhicitta, and then rather than making offerings 100,000 or 100 or 1,000 or 10,000, 100,000 and so forth, generating bodhicitta is more powerful in accumulating merit. And in the Kadamba traditions, the masters have said that you should, by all means, try to develop bodhicitta, because that helps to accumulate merits and stores of merit and wisdom, and also purify your negativities. And so to the Buddha, Dharma, and highest assembly, I seek refuge until I reach enlightenment. To fulfill the interests of oneself and others, I shall generate the mind for awakening. So to be able to preserve your own peace of mind is done by bodhicitta when you are amidst all kinds of problems and disasters even. And having generated the mind for highest awakening, I shall invite all the sentient beings as my guests. So even those who harm the Dharma, for example in Tibet, those who destroy the Dharma and sentient beings are objects of our compassion. I shall invite them, all sentient beings, as my guests, and having invited them to the feast, what you do is you give, you say you will engage in the delightful supreme practices of enlightenment, and may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. So this is a very powerful text which brings so this will bring benefit to not only your near and dear ones, but even those whom you consider to be your adversaries and enemies. So with the visualization of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and Masters, Nagarjuna, Sangha, and so forth, this is the final line of the seven-limb practice. Whatever merit I may have accumulated through prostration, making offering, confession, requesting the teaching, and not to pass away. I dedicate them all to enlightenment. So maybe you don't need to repeat these lines. As I say these lines, please repeat them after me. So as the Lama, I give you the teaching. So regarding these two, the Bodhichitta and the view of emptiness, I am reflecting on them. So accordingly, you should make the determination you will do so. So I seek refuge in the three jewels. I confess all misdeeds individually. I rejoice in the virtues of all beings. I take to heart Buddha's enlightenment. To the Buddha, Dharma, and highest assembly, I seek refuge until I reach enlightenment. To fulfill the interests of oneself and others, I shall generate the mind for awakening. Having generated the mind for highest awakening, I shall invite all sentient beings as my guests. I shall engage in the delightful supreme practice of Buddhist enlightenment. May I achieve Buddhahood to benefit all sentient beings. I seek refuge in the three jewels. I confess all misdeeds individually. I rejoice in the virtuous deeds of all beings. I take to heart Buddha's enlightenment. To the Buddha, Dharma, and highest assembly, I seek refuge until I reach enlightenment. To fulfill the interests of oneself and others, I shall generate the mind for awakening. Having generated the mind for highest awakening, I shall invite all sentient beings as my guests. I shall engage in the delightful supreme practice of enlightenment. May I achieve Buddhahood to benefit all sentient beings. And now at the end of the third repetition, when you say, to fulfill the interests of oneself and others, I shall generate the mind of awakening. So you generate the mind of the spirit of awakening, which is Bodhichitta. And just as the Buddhist, my master, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, has generated this mind, I will also do so. And then at the end, when you say, may I achieve Buddhahood, you think of having generated the Bodhichitta, the Bodhisattva vows. I seek refuge in the three jewels. I confess misdeeds individually. I rejoice in the virtues of all beings. I take to heart Buddha's enlightenment. To the Buddha, Dharma, and his highest assembly, I seek refuge until I am enlightened. To fulfill the interests of myself and others, I shall generate the spirit of enlightenment. Having generated the mind for always awakening, I shall invite all such beings as my guests. I shall engage into the life-full supreme practices of enlightenment. May I achieve Buddhahood to benefit all sentient beings. So these are lines that come from Bodhisattva Charya Avatara. So though we are overpowered by our karma and delusions,
실은 참시 두고 저행에서 주신 저 참시 년로를 저르시비 지디 저연모 동세 심진다와 샤와이 저 메시저를 진진이면 쳐보이 당주오모 수벌 머리니 구충오이 저연 정도 시베 남주시 대회노지 시험한데 와는 되는 대회 저도 냐wan데 심진은 심을 쳐보이 다게 되는 저보 당시 장안 저와 뜻입니다. 바로 때는 정도 그래서 하다 하면서 가월기.
So after these verses come in Bodhisattva Charya Avatara, this third chapter, after having generated bodhicitta and taking bodhisattva vows. So these lines are like, in order to further increase it from now on, the intelligent who have vividly taken the spirit of enlightenment in this way should extol it in the following manner, and so forth. And then today, in the presence of all saviors, I invite all the world to be my guests at the feast of temporal and ultimate bliss. May God, Titans, and all be joyful. So this is the philosophy and science in the classical Buddhist, Indian Buddhist classics. So in Buddhism, we do talk about matter and so forth, and also about mind and emotions. So if we can combine both the signs relating pertaining to the external matter and signs relating to our mind and emotions, and therefore we have written or compiled this book in Tibetan, which have been translated into Chinese and English. And today we have this first book in Italian. And so the Chinese translation was read by some Chinese professors in Lantou University. Of course, the common people in China do not have access to such books that we print from here. And so since the Chinese professors have access to this book, they have said that the Nalanda tradition is scientific and Tibetan Buddhism is a true Nalanda tradition. So this book is in Italian. I would like to thank the translator, Fabrizio. So I hope this will be helpful and beneficial to many people. And then we have also compiled 2 volumes on philosophy, so which contains philosophical assertions of non-Buddhist traditions of India as well as Buddhist traditions. So thank you.
Yeah. Touché. Oh, yeah.